The year is 2018. The car is a black Audi A8. It does not belong on this gravel road. A plume of dust follows it. The dust settles on old fence posts. It settles on the leaves of wild raspberry canes. The car stops in front of a modest farmhouse. White paint peeling in some places. A porch swing moving slightly in the breeze. The man who gets out wears a chef's coat. It is impossibly white against the landscape. His name is Julien Dubois. He has 3 Michelin stars. He closes the car door with a quiet, expensive thud. He looks at the hand-painted sign by the driveway. Vance Family Fungi, established 1998. He walks to the door. He does not knock. He was told not to. Eleanor Vance meets him on the porch. She wipes her hands on her apron. Her hands are covered in soil. She nods. He nods back. They do not speak for a moment. Words are not needed for this transaction. She leads him to a long, low building behind the house. The air changes as they step inside. It becomes cool, damp. It smells of earth and rain and something else, something ancient. The room is filled with racks. On the racks are logs, and from the logs grow mushrooms. Lion's mane like white waterfalls, black pearl oysters in dark velvet clusters, shiitake with their cracked brown caps. Julien walks the aisle slowly. He touches a cluster of blue oysters. He brings his fingers to his nose. He closes his eyes. This is what he drove 5 hours for. This smell, this place. He stops at the far end of the room, a separate chamber behind glass. Inside, the temperature is different, the humidity is higher, and on the carefully controlled substrate, morels, not foraged, cultivated, dozens of them, perfect, honeycombed, impossible morels. Julien puts his hand on the glass. He just stares. The general manager of his restaurant told him it was insane to drive 10 hours round trip for produce, when they had suppliers who would deliver to their door. But the suppliers did not have this. Nobody had this. He turns to Eleanor. His voice is quiet, reverent. How did you do this? Eleanor looks at the morels. She thinks for a long time. Then she says a simple thing. Someone told me I couldn't. That's the kind of story we tell here. Stories about people who were told no, who heard the word impossible, and took it as a starting point. If you believe these are the stories that matter, the quiet histories of those who refuse to be limited, subscribe to this channel, because we have so many more to share. What happened to Eleanor Vance is not just about mushrooms. It's about the most dangerous kind of gatekeeper, the one who thinks they are being kind. Let's go back. The year is 1996. Eleanor Vance is 24 years old. Her hands are not yet calloused from decades of work. Her grandmother, Clara, had passed away that winter. She left Eleanor the 10 acres she owned. 10 acres of mostly woods, a small, crumbling house, and a legacy. Clara knew the woods. She knew the plants you could eat, the ones you could use for medicine, and the ones you left alone. She taught Eleanor everything: how to read the bark on a tree, how to tell the season by the smell of the soil. Her most important lessons were about fungi, where the chanterelles would hide after a summer rain, how to find chicken of the woods on an old oak. She carried a split oak basket. It was her constant companion. Clara used to say a thing. She'd say it while kneeling in the damp leaves, her fingers brushing dirt from the stem of a mushroom. The woods know what the store forgets. Eleanor held on to those words. They were her inheritance, more valuable than the land itself. After the funeral, Eleanor was lost. She had a part-time job at the town library. It paid the bills, barely. The property taxes were due. The house needed a new roof. She needed to find a way. One afternoon, she took her grandmother's basket into the woods, the same woods she'd walked 1,000 times. The air was cool, the ground was damp. It was a perfect day for it. She came back 3 hours later. The basket was full, overflowing, with beautiful golden chanterelles, more than she could ever eat, more than her neighbors could eat. She looked at the basket on her kitchen table, a small, flickering idea. The Pine Ridge County Co-op had opened 2 years prior. It was a point of pride for the town: local produce, local honey, local crafts. A place for the community to support itself. The manager was a man named Mark Peterson. Everyone knew Mark. He coached Little League. He served on the town council. He was a good man, a pillar of the community. He was fair, he was honest, and he was certain about how things should be done. Eleanor packed a small box of the chanterelles, the best ones, cleaned, perfect. She drove her old pickup truck into town. The bell on the co-op door jingled. The store smelled of fresh bread and spices. Mark was at the counter, talking to a farmer. He smiled when he saw Eleanor, a genuine, warm smile. "Eleanor, how are you holding up? We were all so sorry to hear about Clara. She was a special woman." Eleanor nodded. "Thank you, Mark." She placed the box on the counter. "I was thinking, I'd like to sell these here." Mark looked at the mushrooms. He picked one up. He admired it. "These are beautiful. Clara taught you well." He put the mushroom back in the box. His expression shifted. It was not unkind. It was something worse. It was careful, paternal. "Eleanor," he said, "I can't." She felt a cold knot in her stomach. "Why not? They're local, they're fresh." He leaned on the counter. He lowered his voice, as if to protect her from embarrassment. "I know they are, but they're foraged, wild. That's a liability I can't take on. What if you pick the wrong one by mistake, just once? What if someone gets sick? Or worse, the co-op could be sued. We could lose everything." Eleanor stood straight. "My grandmother taught me. I know what I'm doing." Mark sighed. It was a patient, gentle sigh. The kind a father gives a child who doesn't understand the world. "I know you think you do, and I'm sure Clara was the best, but there are regulations, health codes. I have to think about the safety of everyone. I'm not going to be the man who let something tragic happen." He pushed the box gently back toward her. "I'm sorry. I really am. But the answer is no." He thought he was protecting her. He thought he was protecting the community. He believed, with every fiber of his being, that he was doing the right thing. His certainty was a brick wall. She couldn't fight it with anger. She couldn't argue against his kindness. It was a soft, gentle refusal that was harder to break than any shouted command. She took the box. She didn't say another word. She walked out of the co-op. The bell jingled behind her. She drove home. The beautiful golden mushrooms sat on the passenger seat. They felt like a failure. She sat at her kitchen table, the one her grandmother had used. She looked at the woods through the window. The woods know what the store forgets. The words echoed in her mind. Mark wasn't a bad person. He was a certain person. He was certain about the rules. He was certain about the risks. He was certain about her capabilities, or her lack of them. That certainty was the real poison, not some imagined poisonous mushroom. She looked at the box of chanterelles. She could sell them from a roadside stand, but that was small, temporary. It wouldn't pay the taxes. It wouldn't fix the roof. It wouldn't build a life. The problem wasn't the mushrooms. The problem was the word foraged, the word wild. It was the lack of control, the unknown. So, she thought, I will control it. I will make it known. She wouldn't fight his rules. She would create a new system where his rules didn't apply. She wouldn't argue with him. She would make his argument irrelevant. This is where the story turns. This is where despair becomes a blueprint. She stood up from the table. She walked to the small, dusty bookshelf. She pulled out her grandmother's old books. Not the ones on foraging, the ones on gardening, on soil, on propagation, and next to them, her own books from a community college biology class. Textbooks on mycology, on sterile cultures, on spawn. She stayed up all night, reading, making notes. A new idea taking root in her mind. If the world was afraid of the wild, she would tame it. She would not be a forager, she would become a farmer, a mushroom farmer. The next morning, she walked into the woods. She didn't take the basket, she took a small knife, and a dozen sterile lab vials. She found a perfect cluster of oyster mushrooms. She carefully took a tissue sample from the inside of the stem. She placed it in a vial. She did the same with a shiitake, a turkey tail. She was harvesting not the mushrooms, but their future, their genetic code. She came back to the house. She emptied her savings account. $712. She spent it not on the roof, but on a pressure cooker, petri dishes, grain bags, a second-hand flow hood she found in a classified ad. She turned the small mudroom at the back of the house into a laboratory. She scrubbed it with bleach until her hands were raw. She sterilized everything. She worked for weeks. Failures outnumbered successes. Contamination was a constant enemy. A stray bacterium, a speck of green mold. Each failure was a petri dish thrown away, a grain bag tossed on the compost heap. But she learned. She learned the art of sterile technique, the patience of a scientist. Slowly, carefully, she grew out the mycelium. White, feathery threads expanding across the petri dishes. It was life, pure, controlled life. She transferred the cultures to sterilized grain. She watched the mycelium colonize the bags, turning them into dense white blocks. Her first success was a bag of blue oyster spawn. She took it to the old, dilapidated barn behind the house. The barn where her grandfather had once milked 2 cows. It was dark. It was damp. It was perfect. She drilled holes in a 5-gallon bucket. She packed it with pasteurized straw. She mixed in the grain spawn, and then she waited. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. She checked it every day. Doubt began to creep in. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe this was a foolish dream. Then, one morning, she saw them. Tiny pins, little bumps of blue-gray pushing their way out of the holes in the bucket. Within 3 days, they were a magnificent, cascading cluster of blue oyster mushrooms. Perfect, clean, controlled, not foraged, farmed. She held the bucket in her hands. It weighed almost 5 pounds. This was more than food. It was proof. Proof that she could do it. That she didn't need the co-op's permission. She didn't need Mark Peterson's approval. The dirt is enough. Her grandmother had said that too. About the soil in her garden. Eleanor now understood it differently. The fundamental material was enough. The knowledge was enough. She was enough. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend. By someone who genuinely believed they were helping you. Someone who saw a limit for you that you did not see for yourself. What did you do? Did you believe them? Or did you do what Eleanor did? Did you go home and build a new world? A world where their limits no longer applied? Let us know in the comments. Because what happened next changed everything for Eleanor Vance and for her town. That first bucket was the beginning. She sold that first 5-pound harvest to the local diner. The owner, a woman named Shirley, Didn't ask if they were foraged. She saw the quality. She tasted them. She paid Eleanor in cash, $25. Eleanor put that money in an envelope. She labeled it the farm. Every dollar she made went back into the business. She bought more buckets, more straw, more grain. She built shelves in the old barn. She hung plastic sheeting to control the humidity. Soon, she had a dozen buckets, then 50, then 100. Her little farm grew. The community began to notice. Some were skeptical. Old farmers who couldn't understand growing something in a bucket instead of a field. They'd talk at the feed store. Clara's girl is doing something strange out there, trying to grow mushrooms like they're tomatoes. It ain't natural. That was the doubters' chorus. It ain't natural. But others were curious. Shirley, at the diner, put a new item on her menu. Eleanor's mushroom omelet. It sold out every weekend. People started asking, "Who is Eleanor? Where are these mushrooms from?" A few people drove out to the farm. They saw the clean, organized barn. They saw the beautiful, healthy mushrooms. They bought a bag to take home. They became her first regular customers, her supporters. They didn't see something unnatural. They saw ingenuity. They saw a young woman making a living from nothing, from an inheritance of woods and knowledge. Mark Peterson, at the co-op, heard the talk. He saw Shirley at the bank. She told him about the omelet. She told him people were driving from the next county over to try it. Mark just nodded. He felt a strange mix of pride and something else, something he couldn't quite name. He told himself he had done the right thing. He had followed the rules. He was still protecting people. But he would drive the long way home sometimes. Past the turnoff to Eleanor's farm, he'd see her old truck loaded with buckets. He'd see cars he didn't recognize turning down her gravel road. He was a quiet witness to her quiet success, and he held on to his certainty. He was right about foraged mushrooms, and these were not foraged, so his decision was still correct. This is the logic of a man who cannot admit he was wrong. He redefines the argument. He makes it smaller until his original position remains untouched, undefeated, safe. But Eleanor wasn't thinking about Mark. She was thinking about the future. Let me tell you about the next 20 years, because this is where the story becomes bigger than one woman and a barn. 1998, Eleanor officially registered her business, Vance Family Fungi. She used the profits from the first 2 years to pour a concrete floor in the barn. Cash. She installed a commercial humidifier. Cash. She bought a used refrigerated van. Cash. She was now delivering to 3 restaurants in the county. Her weekly yield was 100 pounds, oysters and shiitake. She was experimenting with lion's mane. 2001. She had a waiting list of customers. She hired her first employee, a high school kid named Sam who was saving for college. She paid him $2 above minimum wage. Cash. She built a second grow house, a proper insulated building with climate control. She took out no loans. She owed nothing to anyone. Her weekly yield was now 250 pounds. She was delivering to 7 restaurants, and she had started a small stall at the weekend farmers market, not the co-op, the independent market in the next town over. People lined up at her stall. They bought her mushrooms, and they bought her spawn kits, little blocks of mycelium so they could grow their own at home. She wasn't just selling a product, she was selling the knowledge. She was giving away the secret. 2005. Sam, her first employee, was in college, studying mycology. Eleanor had paid for his first year's textbooks. Cash. She now had 3 employees, 4 grow houses. Her weekly yield was 500 pounds. She was shipping to restaurants in the state capital. Her lion's mane mushrooms were becoming legendary among chefs. She had spent years refining the strain. selecting for density and flavor. This was not farming, it was artistry. Mark Peterson saw her name in a magazine, a Sunday supplement about regional agriculture. There was a picture of Eleanor, standing in her clean, modern facility. She looked confident, peaceful. The article called her a pioneer, an innovator. It mentioned her unique cultivation methods. It did not mention the Pine Ridge County Co-op. It did not mention his refusal. That part of the story had been forgotten by everyone, except Eleanor, and except Mark. 2012. Eleanor began her most ambitious project, cultivating morels, the holy grail of mycology, a mushroom that experts said could not be reliably farmed. It was too wild, too symbiotic, too mysterious. She spent years researching, experimenting with soil composition, temperature fluctuations, humidity cycles. She converted a section of her woods into an outdoor laboratory. She failed for 3 years straight. Her employees told her to give up. Her accountant told her it was a waste of money. But she remembered her grandmother. The woods know what the store forgets. She believed the morel had a secret to tell, and she was patient enough to listen. 2015. It happened. A small patch of land, covered in 100 perfect blonde morels. They had grown from her substrate, in her woods, under her care. She had done it. She had unlocked the secret. She didn't celebrate. She didn't shout. She knelt down. She touched one of the honeycombed caps, and she whispered 2 words, "Thank you." 2018. The year Chef Julien Dubois' black Audi drove down her gravel road. The whispers about her morels had reached the world of fine dining, a world of celebrity chefs and impossible standards, a world that now came to her, asking, hoping, for a chance to buy what she had created. Her farm was now the largest specialty mushroom producer in the state. 10 employees, 6 climate-controlled buildings, a state-of-the-art lab, a fleet of 2 refrigerated vans, all of it built on a foundation of one gentle, well-meaning refusal. All of it paid for. Cash. She never borrowed a dime. She never asked for permission again. She had built her freedom, one mushroom at a time. But that's not the end of the story. Because the past never really goes away. It just waits. The Pine Ridge County Co-op was struggling. A big chain grocery store had opened on the edge of town. Their prices were lower. Their selection was bigger. The co-op, once the heart of the community, was slowly bleeding out. Their produce suppliers were unreliable. Their shelves were often half empty. Mark Peterson was older now. His hair was gray. The easy confidence in his eyes had been replaced by a weary worry. He had kept the co-op alive, but just barely. One Tuesday morning, he sat in his small office. He was looking at the numbers. They were not good. He knew he needed something new, something to bring people back, something special, something local. His gaze drifted out the window. He saw one of Eleanor's vans drive by, the logo clear on the side, Vance Family Fungi. He watched it until it was out of sight. He sat there for a very long time. Then he picked up the phone. He dialed a number he had looked up but never called. A woman answered. "Vance Fungi, this is Sarah." Mark's throat was dry. "Hello, may I speak to Eleanor Vance, please?" There was a pause. "Who's calling?" "Mark Peterson, from the co-op." The pause was longer this time. "Please hold." He waited. Each second felt like a minute. He thought about what he would say. He realized he hadn't prepared. What could he say? "I'm sorry? I was wrong? I need your help?" Eleanor's voice came on the line. It was calm, even. "Mark," he cleared his throat. "Eleanor, hello. I was wondering if I could come out and talk to you. About business." Another pause. She was not going to make this easy for him. But she was not going to be cruel. It was not her way. "All right. Tomorrow at 10?" She hung up. Mark sat with the dead phone in his hand. He felt something he had not felt in 22 years. He felt small. The next day, he drove his old Ford pickup down her gravel road. The same road the black Audi had taken. The farm was transformed. The old, crumbling house was now beautifully restored. The barn was gone, replaced by modern, clean buildings. Young people were working, loading boxes into a van. It was a thriving, professional operation. He had expected a farm. This was an empire, built of mushrooms. Eleanor met him on the porch, the same porch where she met the chef. She did not offer him coffee. She did not invite him inside. She just waited. Mark fumbled with his hat in his hands. You've done an amazing thing here, Eleanor. Truly amazing." She nodded, a small, single motion. It was not a thank you. It was a statement of fact. He took a deep breath. "I'm here because the co-op is in trouble. We're having a hard time getting good, reliable produce. Our customers are leaving. I was wondering if you would consider selling to us, your mushrooms, anything else you might grow." He finally looked her in the eye. "We'd be proud to carry your products." Eleanor was silent for a full minute. Mark could hear the hum of the climate control units, the sound of his own heart beating. He had rehearsed this moment, but he had not rehearsed for her silence. Her silence was a mirror. It showed him the man he had been 22 years ago. The kind man, the certain man, the man who had stood on the other side of a counter and said no. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was quiet and devastating. "You know, Mark," she said, "for 10 years, every time I drove past the turnoff to town, I'd think about you. I'd think about that day. I used to imagine this conversation, what you would say, what I would say." She looked out over her farm, her world. "Then, one day, I drove past, and I didn't think about it at all. I had forgotten, until you called yesterday." She looked back at him. "The problem isn't that you said no to my mushrooms. Lots of people said no in the beginning. The problem is that you said no to me. You decided what I was capable of. You told me my knowledge wasn't real. You did it with a smile. You did it to protect me. And that was the cruelest part of all." Mark Peterson stood on the porch of the empire she had built, and for the first time, he understood. He had not just made a bad business decision, he had committed a deeper error, an error of imagination. He could not imagine a world where a young woman with a basket of foraged mushrooms could become this. And his failure of imagination had almost cost her everything. Instead, it had become her fuel. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. Eleanor looked at the man, the pillar of the community. He looked broken. She made a decision, not out of pity, but out of principle. Her grandmother taught her to be kind, but she had taught herself to be strong. "My delivery schedule is full," she said, "but I can add a stop. On Tuesdays, you can have whatever is left after my restaurant orders are filled, and you will pay the same price as Chef Dubois." Mark nodded, unable to speak. "Thank you, Eleanor," he finally managed to say. She gave a final, small nod. Don't thank me. Just be a better gatekeeper. Remember that the next time a young person with a crazy idea comes through your door, their idea might be the one thing that saves you. He left. And every Tuesday, a Vance family fungi van would pull up to the co-op. The mushrooms sold out in hours. It didn't save the co-op. It was too late for that. But it gave it a little more time, a little more dignity in its decline. It was a quiet act of grace from a woman who had every right to refuse. The story of Eleanor Vance doesn't end there. Her legacy is not in the mushrooms she sold, but in the seeds she planted. In 2020, she established the Clara Vance Grant, a scholarship for young women in the county pursuing degrees in agriculture or biology. She funded it herself. Cash. She started mentoring young farmers, teaching them her methods, her philosophy of self-sufficiency. No debt, no partners, no asking for permission. Own your land, own your knowledge, own your work. Sam, her first employee, now has a PhD in mycology. He runs her lab. He is developing new strains, pushing the science forward. Chef Julien Dubois features her name on his menu. Vance Fungi Morels. Diners who can afford the $500 tasting menu read her name, and they know it means quality. They do not know the story. They do not know about the co-op, or the kind man who said no. They only know the taste of something perfect, something grown with patience, and a quiet, unbreakable will. Today, if you visit the farmhouse, you will see something on the mantelpiece in the living room. It's an old, split oak foraging basket. It is weathered. The handle is smooth from a lifetime of use. It is empty. It is not used for foraging anymore. It is an artifact, a reminder that everything she built, this entire world of science and commerce, started in the woods, with a grandmother's wisdom and a basket full of mushrooms that someone refused to buy. Eleanor's daughter, Clara, named after her great-grandmother, sometimes takes the basket down. She holds it. She runs her fingers over the woven wood. She is studying business in college. She plans to come home, to run the farm one day, to take it into the future. The legacy continues. The story is not over. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is standing in front of a counter, a desk, a loan officer, a gatekeeper. They are holding their idea in their hands, their passion, their hope, and a kind, well-meaning person is about to say no. They are about to explain, patiently, why it's impossible, why it's too risky, why it's for their own good. This story is for that person, the one who is about to walk away, defeated by kindness. Don't let their imagination be the boundary for your life. Go home. Start small. Use what you have. Build your own world. And maybe, in 20 years, they will come knocking on your door, asking to buy the very thing they once refused. If this story means something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone who is facing their own gentle refusal. Let them know they are not alone. And subscribe for more stories of the quiet victors, the ones who prove that the most fertile ground for innovation is the word no.